Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. It was a busy week for the industry last week as confirmations continued on Capitol Hill for President Trump's cabinet appointees. May corn touched $5, and the U.S. Supreme Court released its decision on the Corporate Transparency Act. Joining me now to discuss that is Will McKinley. He's the president and CEO of the Menn Law Firm in Appleton, Wisconsin. And Will, thanks for talking with us today.
Thanks for having me this morning.
So CTA's back in the news. Refresh our memories, if you would. What is the Corporate Transparency Act?
The Corporate Transparency Act is the bane of many farmers and business owners alike in the United States. Essentially, it was a law that was passed to provide for security checks on small businesses and big businesses alike in the United States. It essentially requires business entities to file reports with the federal government disclosing information about the owners of those entities along with those who are in control. So it's an information gathering law, essentially.
And I understand that beneficial ownership information, or the BOI data, that's what's frustrating for a lot of producers. What is it, time consuming to report this information?
It's frustrating and time consuming and very confusing. That's probably the most important part, because it's not everyone has to be disclosed. And so you have to go online, you have to create an account, you have to upload driver's licenses, fill in a bunch of information. But a lot of the questions that I receive from producers basically is, well, do I have to report this person because they're a manager, but they're not an owner, but they're in control? So it's created a lot of confusion and, again, a lot of extra just stress that people already have enough of these days.
And, of course, that has prompted several legal attacks against it. There's been back and forth for the past 6 months. Last week, the Supreme Court issued a decision. Will, fill us in. What did that decision do to this law?
That's right. So just by taking a step back, the law was originally enjoined by a federal district court in Texas nationally, meaning it didn't have to be enforced. A federal appeals court then overruled that injunction and said, no, the law has to be enforced. That same federal appeals court then reversed itself and said, no, the law doesn't have to be enforced. It was then appealed to the United States Supreme Court, who just said, well, the injunction is lifted and the law is then enforceable. However, the agency has now said it's not going to enforce the law despite the lift of the injunction, frankly, because of all the confusion that has happened. And there's also litigation still pending in Texas where there's a question of a different court enjoining the law. So it's a mess is what it is.
It is a mess. Given this period of uncertainty, are there anything farmers and business owners need to be doing today to prepare?
As of right now, compliance isn't required. So there's nothing that anyone needs to do. If you have complied already, there's no harm in that. But if you haven't, then you can sit tight. However, if the courts ultimately say that the law is now enforceable in the sense that the agency isn't going to actually start policing it, you can expect a pretty quick turnaround. And so you should have your information ready to go.
All right, be prepared. Keep an eye on those headlines. Hopefully we won't hear much about the CTA, but we always could. Will McKinley, President and CEO of the Menn Law Firm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. And it's time to discuss the markets. Joining us this week is Pedro Dejneka. He's a partner and broker with MD Commodities. And Pedro, thanks for talking with us this week.
Always a pleasure, Mike.
Now, before we get into what's ahead for the corn and soybean prices, I want to talk about a recent trip you made down to Brazil. Pedro, of course, you're very familiar with that country, and fill us in on what you saw. How does that soybean crop look on the ground in Brazil?
Well, listen, always great to go down there, especially around this time of the year, to try to understand what's really going down, what's really happening. And there's a few things we got to talk about. Number one is it rains a lot in Mato Grosso, which is obviously, I think by now a lot of U.S. producers understand it. If they don't, Mato Grosso alone, which is the largest soybean producing state in Brazil, produces more than Illinois, Iowa, and half of Minnesota put together, right? So it's just gigantic amount of production coming out of that state. Now, it always rains a lot in January, February, so harvest is a little bit of an adrenaline filled activity because not only are they harvesting beans, they're also planting corn and cotton.
Yeah.
Right. So right behind it. So again, it's and there's a lot of talk every single year. Oh, it's raining too much. Oh, harvest is delayed. Listen, harvest does not really matter. Harvest pace does not really matter in Brazil until February. February is when they really get going. We're going to get a little break in the weather. But also, regarding the yields themselves, I can tell you one thing. We're hearing a lot. I made a post on X recently about this at PhD Chicago, for those of you that don't follow me yet. But it's we're getting reports from clients that are astounded, not on the negative side. They're basically saying, Pedro, I don't know what happened. I mean, I've just harvested a part of my field here, and I'm getting an average of 80 bushels an acre, 85 bushels an acre. You know, it's 90 bushels an acre. So it's, again, am I saying that is happening throughout Brazil? Of course not. Of course not. What I'm trying to say is that the top end of yields has been, stretching upwards in recent years. I mean, we had guys that on 100,000 acres used to be happy with, call it 60 bushel bean in the past. Right now, they're averaging 70.
Oof.
It's something that is 65, 70, like that's being ratcheted up. And so for me, I think we have to be very cautious with a lot of the nonsense that goes around the market. The starting point for the soybean crop in Brazil was way too low at 169. That is a low number. The starting point was much closer to 180, 185. So again, are we having issues in the south? Drought in Rio Grande do Sul. Are we having the Argentinian crop? It's not going to be 52 million metric tons. It's going to be closer to 45. So is Brazil going to harvest 180? No, it is not. But it's going to be difficult, Mike, to get that crop under 170.
Oof. And 170, for those of us here in America, that's 170 million metric tons. That computes to just about 6.25 billion bushels. That is a huge crop. Now, Pedro, you mentioned we've got just about a minute before we go to commercial. Big soybean crop means we could plant a big corn crop. Are you hearing from Brazilian farmers excited to put a big corn crop in the ground?
Yes, absolutely. Corn has changed in Brazil. It is now a very, very desirable crop. There's corn ethanol plants going up everywhere in the country. So domestic usage has been climbing very, very steadily here recently. Exports are very competitive. I believe Brazil this year is going to export a lot of corn, unlike what happened last year. So the USA is going to have a lot of competition coming from Brazil and Argentina on the corn exports, and Ukraine as well.
Absolutely. And when we come back with Pedro Dejneka, we'll talk about what all of this information could mean for U.S. markets. So stay with us. We'll be back with more on This Week in Agribusiness. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. And we're back talking markets with Pedro Dejneka, partner and broker with MD Commodities. And Pedro, you talked about the massive potential for both corn and soybeans coming out of Brazil as we get deeper into the spring. Let's talk about what that could mean for price levels. May corn at $5, should American farmers be selling?
That's a very nice level, especially considering where we were not too long ago, Mike, just a few months back, below $4, or pretty close to $4 there. It really depends on people's individual situation, their cash flow situation, and there's a lot of factors that play into, but it's difficult to ignore the opportunity, especially when you and I both know that we're going to see, you and I and every one of you watching and listening, understand that you're going to see at least, in my opinion, 93 to 94 million acres of corn being planted this year in the United States. Could we have a surprise and maybe that number is not as high? Sure, I think the chances are minimal, and I actually believe there's a chance that the number could be even higher, considering where the relation with soybean price is at this point. So, when you look at the combination of those factors, and all of a sudden, say you have decent weather in the United States, and now you have more competition coming from Brazil, from Argentina, from Ukraine. Yeah, you got to look at the $5 level very cautiously and very carefully before you ignore it.
Now, you mentioned those risks coming. 94 to 95 million acres in the U.S., that potentially very large safrinha crop coming out of Brazil. Pedro, that looks like a lot of risk in that December corn contract at 460, 465. Is that worth getting some price protection on?
Absolutely. I'm always going to think that way. I'm a risk manager for our guys. We work with producers. We're always on the cautious side. And a lot of times, the risk of carrying the physical and the expenses that you incur carrying the physical is not worth it, or they are not worth it for me and for our clients, right? So a lot of times we tell our clients, listen, you got an outstanding opportunity in front of you. Bring the cash bring it inside your home, put it in your pocket. And if you think that, oh my goodness, we might have a drought, I want to participate. Okay, go to the board and buy some cheap calls or call spreads or do something that's going to cost you a fraction. Even if we're in a situation where calls are expensive, volatility is high, it's still in a lot of ways worth the peace of mind that you get knowing that you have taken care of your business and you're ready for your next crop with plenty of cash flow available.
Absolutely. Same question for you here on soybeans, Pedro. We've got that risk floating out there. What's your advice to growers looking at beans for new crop?
This is a bear market bounce in soybeans. I just posted something on X, again, at PhD Chicago, showing the world stocks. We're going to see a reduction in world stocks from the current USDA number that is from 128 to somewhere close to 123 after reductions in the South America crop. But Mike, make no mistake about it, we're still looking at 122, 123 million metric tons of world stocks, and that is still a new record by almost 10 million metric tons compared to the 114 from a few years ago. This is a bear market bounce. Don't buy into the hype, guys. Yes, we're going to see less area in the soybeans in the United States, but I still think we need to digest the main harvest window in South America of a gigantic record crop. Do not underestimate that.
All right, so we'll be watching for additional data coming out of South America over the coming weeks. That harvest is going to intensify, Pedro, as you mentioned earlier. We'll be watching to see just how that manifests. For folks who are curious about what is ongoing in Brazil, Pedro, mention one more time, where do you post your updates online about what's happening in that country?
At PhD Chicago on X, a lot of the English, I do a lot of my English speaking analysis there. I put little posts there, and I think people find it quite useful, and they like to, poke fun of me and hate on me every once in a while, and I love it. Bring it on.
It's all about that conversation. That's what makes the markets. Pedro Dejneka, MD Commodities, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Always a pleasure.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Well, Greg's been watching those maps and charts. And Greg, it's been quiet in the Pacific Northwest last week. Does that continue?
No, pattern shift. We're into La Nina mode here finally, and it will be one after another weather systems. This is a more typical whole upper atmospheric change that's going on across North America. And here are the details with Arctic air, not this full-blown dump of air into the middle part of the country, relatively shallow jet stream winds kind of running west to east, so that undercuts some of the cold. But at the same time, we've got a big storm system out across the northern Pacific, the Gulf of Alaska. It'll be one system after another, one moving on through areas south and east of Yellowstone, another one offshore here. This is the main upper air low, so wind and colder and falling snow levels across the Cascades, moisture into northern California, strong winds as well. And look at the blanketing of snowfall that can pick us up out of sections of northern Idaho, the Rockies, back across areas of the plains, and even Nebraska, along with that cold air. Windy weather conditions as well. Outdoor workers and livestock managers, and for a change, we'll actually put down some significant snowpack and snowfall, which has been pretty much disappointing, or has certainly varied greatly this wintertime season over the northern plains and points on southward. Into the southwestern reaches of the country, this will be the at least southern extension of that storm into the northern Pacific. So there's wind and moisture here too. Surprisingly, the peaks are in relatively good shape from a runoff standpoint here, 125% of normal into the northern Sierra, and really about almost average or typical in the peaks of the southern Sierra too. In any event, event. One system after another on the southern end of that cold air will bring both rain and snow into the plain states. A couple of showers in through Texas, and moisture will be picking up all the way down south of the LA basin. Watch for runoff potential there as the week wears on. And some of these totals will be upwards of a half a foot or more from Northern California northward, and more than that in the mountains of the west. Much colder air into the northern and central plains. Another system or two moving on through, both snow, freezing rain and wind. It's a more typical setup of wintertime across the plains than another system into the central valleys of California. Mike has maybe some thunderstorm activity as well later in the week.
All right, I was going to ask, Greg, last week saw a thaw in the northern Corn Belt, but it sounds like that's not coming back.
No, that's not coming back. Arctic air, not all the way from the Canadian border, all the way down past the Ohio, like we said in previous cold air intrusions. This is relatively shallow, but it also serves up a mixed bag of moisture in one form or another. Here's the Arctic air. It's a change to more seasonal temperatures across the western Corn Belt, and here's the leading edge of the colder air across areas of the eastern and southern complex, with, again, moisture in one form or another, and another feature or two or three, one through the upper Midwest. Another one coming across Nebraska will add to the snowpack and snowfall. Just an inch so far at Lincoln, Nebraska, not even 5 inches at Des Moines. That's pretty anemic here for this time of the year, but we will add to it significantly so with sub-zero cold up near the Canadian border. Areas of the southern plains will change back into colder weather from Kansas on south and eastward. We're in relatively good shape, dryness and drought here, but you get northward in through Nebraska and the Dakotas. Tough conditions out there. Warm weather back into Texas, and the moisture is back into play as well with showers and thunderstorms. Could be heavy and severe parts of eastern Texas. We had a corridor of 4+ inch rains last week from the Metroplex into the Ozarks, where maybe a little rain snow system gets going into the southern Corn Belt locale. So busy as well, even into the southern plains as the week wears on.
Do you see that meteorological activity continuing all the way to the East Coast?
It will. First, a thaw coming off some of the thunder and squalls and snow and downfalls of snow across New York State into Michigan, and those 55-mile-an-hour winds of last week. So a thaw here, more seasonal temperatures over the eastern Corn Belt. Here's the Arctic air and a series of systems moving on through, with snowfall picking up over the northern and central Great Lakes region. And this low here bears watching, with maybe some ice potential. Parts of the central Corn Belt, snows to the north, rains down to the south, and that moisture into the mid-Atlantic region as well, with kind of a dry weather pattern, some droughty conditions there too so far this winter time season. Over the southeastern parts of the country, it's a reversal here into something more typical for the time of year. Showers across the Gulf Coast, colder weather into sections of the southern plains, moisture down through Florida. As the week wears on, this low and cold front will get going, with showers and thunderstorms picking on up from the Carolinas back into areas of eastern Texas. Some of those could turn heavy and severe. Shower activity down through Florida as well. Any cold air likely to stay up across sections of the Tennessee Valley northward into the Ohio Valley, and a change back to more seasonal readings across the southern Corn Belt. Opportunities for significant moisture are certainly ahead this week, with some significant moisture totals out of Texas, the Tennessee Valley, mid-Atlantic region as the week wears on.
Well, folks, this past week I had the opportunity to travel up to Minot, North Dakota for the annual meeting of the Northern Pulse Growers. Now, Minot in January might be a tough sell, but the crowd was so warm to me that it really felt welcoming. What I learned there was that pulse crops, as we look forward, have a really exciting outlook. So I wanted to check in with the CEO of USA Pulses, that's Tim McGreevy, this week for an update on the industry. And Tim, thanks for talking with us.
Oh, yeah, it's great to be here, Mike. You had such a great presentation in Minot, and heck, it was actually pretty warm in Minot. Amazing.
It was beautiful. And let's talk about the pulse crops, though, Tim, because for a lot of America, we don't see pulses growing in the fields. Talk to us about what they are. What comprises pulse crops?
So pulse crops are peas, lentils, chickpeas, and dry beans. And the root of the word pulse actually is a Latin word meaning thick soup, right? So when those Romans were conquering the world, right, they were doing it with a pulse on their backs with a little cereal grain, mostly rice, and that's why they were able to travel long distances. So that's where the word pulse comes from. But peas, lentils, chickpeas, and dry beans.
All right, peas, lentils, chickpeas, and dry beans. Now, of course, those are produced by growers across the country, predominantly up in the northern parts of our land. And Tim, I understand you're heading to Washington, D.C. next week. What's on the mind of the industry?
Oh, there's a lot going on, of course. There's big changes. You know, we have a new administration. And of course, with a new administration, there's always new opportunities, as well as, you know, we have to educate all of our newly elected lawmakers on our priorities, and we have many priorities, right? We are seeking higher research funding for these really terrific foods that are not only terrific, nutrient dense, but good health outcomes, but also very sustainable and absolutely critical for your cropping systems and diversifying your cropping systems all around this country, which is what we hope to do.
Absolutely. From the perspective of marketing, Tim, how much of pulse crops are exported? How much are consumed here in the United States? Do we know that?
Yeah, so it varies a little bit between the pulse, right? So dry beans, it's about 50-50, 50% is exported. If you look at lentils, it's a little higher percentage, up there and around the 70% are exported. Dry peas actually are around 60%, and chickpeas are again about 50% of our product that goes overseas. So export markets are super important to us, but we have a growing domestic market as well.
That's the part that seems so interesting to me. As we hear more conversation about healthy eating, making America healthy again, and nutrient density, it really seems like pulses have a good fit in there, that thick soup, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. Are you seeing pulse consumption climb domestically?
Yeah, no doubt. Pulse consumption is definitely climbing. The plant forward movement is real. And hey, look, the plant forward movement, our crops blend with everybody, You can't have chili without the beans, okay? So I'm telling you, this is a great crop and blends with animal proteins. It blends with cereal grains. It is the most friendly crop that you can imagine, and it's good for your soils as well. So yes, these crops are really outstanding, outstanding crops, and they are on the rise. And the reason they are is because they are really good. The health outcomes by increasing your consumption of pulses is very well known, scientifically just totally vetted. And if, our country has a huge problem with heart disease, Mike, and that's just reality. We have a huge problem with diabetes, and these crops help lower your cholesterol, your LDL cholesterol. These crops can help you with weight management as well. They're good on many types of cancers because they have antioxidants. And the truth is, we just don't consume enough of them. I mean, right now, we consume about a little under 12 pounds per person per year. And that's just not enough to gain the health outcomes. So, we're really working to increase consumption. And recently, right, the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, looking at the recent science that's out there that really supports this, they made a recommendation to increase the recommendation in the dietary guidelines for Americans from 1.5 cups to 2.5 cups per person per week. And, it's not a huge increase, but it was the only food group in that scientific report that got an increase. And there's a reason for that. It's because the overall health outcomes for Americans, if we increase consumption of these crops just a little bit, will really be good for the health of this country. And so, yes, we are very interested in making America healthy again, and we think that road leads through pulse crops.
That is fantastic to hear, Tim, and I know that's the kind of optimism I was hearing a lot up in Minot. And my question to you then is the next stage. If we're going to be consuming more here in the United States, do we need to develop more processing here in this country to continue to meet that demand, do you think, longer term?
Our goal as an organization at USA Pulses is to double pulse crop consumption and production, because not only, Mike, are these crops really good for your health, they're also good for soil health. And frankly, we need more crop diversity in this country. And the great news about pulses is there is a pulse for just about every climate that is grown here in the United States. You can grow pulses in the South, you can grow pulses in the cold North, you can grow pulses in the Midwest. There's a pulse that fits. And so I believe, right, that we're going to see an expansion of acreage as our demand increases. And that's going to be good news for the farmers and for the people of this country for their health.
It certainly will. I'm looking forward to that. I know I enjoy my good, hearty, healthy beans on occasion, and I think I need to make that occasion more frequently. Tim McGreevy, CEO of USA Pulses, thank you so much for joining us here this week.
Oh, awesome, and great job. Good to see you in Minot.
Hey, it was great to get up here. It was great to meet pulse growers. And folks, stick around. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness after this.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH. Built by farmers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. It's cold across the northern Corn Belt, too cold to put any seeds in the ground, but it is a great time of year to think about how this growing season is going to go. Joining me now to talk about that is Jeff Moon. He's the Market Development Specialist with Corteva Agriscience. And Jeff, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us. Looking forward to our conversation.
As you think about what growers need to have in mind before the growing season starts, Jeff, are there 5 key fundamentals that you think they need to have their eye on?
You know, I think we can break it down into a few categories here. First off, you might want to think about the soil and knowing what you're dealing with. So if you haven't taken a soil test yet, maybe you didn't get that done last fall, certainly this spring when the ground is thawed out, depending upon where you live, get out there and get a soil test done so you know what your different nutrient levels are in the soil. So that'll help you dial in that plan a little bit better when it comes to your fertilizer applications and knowing what your pH levels are and organic matter, all that is important. And so if you don't have that baseline, that's a really good place to start.
Absolutely. And I would imagine that funnels very nicely into, as you mentioned, that nutrient management component.
Yep. I think people certainly want to get the most out of their investment that they put out there in the soil. And so making sure that you're putting out the right amount of fertilizer, N, P, and K, but then also managing that and making sure that it's there when the plants need it. So specifically in corn, we think about nitrogen. Nitrogen is one of the more expensive investments that a grower will make in their corn crop. And we want to make sure they get the most out of that investment. And so protecting that investment with a nitrogen stabilizer like N-Serve or Instinct would be something to consider this spring, because in the spring of the year is when we can lose those nutrients, when those spring rains come. And we want to make sure they're there when the corn plants need them. So we need to protect that investment so that we get the most out of that.
Absolutely. And of course, those spring rains come, they flush nutrients. They also encourage weed seeds to flush out. Are you thinking about weed control this early?
Absolutely. Growers should be visiting with their retailers about what they want to do this spring. Let that retailer know whether it's grower applied or custom applied. You want to make sure that your retailer has those products that you need on hand. And so by communicating here this winter, making those plans, that's the best way to do that. And then you can also visit with that retailer about, if there's something new that you should be looking at, either in corn. A lot of the companies out there bring some new things to the market every year. We've got a couple of new products this year in Versa that can be used in soybeans. We've got a new pre-emerge herbicide called Kyber Pro. In corn, we've got one called Resicor Rev. So there's always new advancements, new innovation coming, and growers should hear about that and find out if that's a good fit for their farms.
And then I imagine they need to start making plans to get into the field and scout how are these products working for them.
Absolutely. Keeping a good eye on what's going on out in your field is a great way to make sure that you're going to be successful. And so we want to make sure that pre-emerge herbicide program worked. We want to make sure those seeds came out of the ground and we've got a good stand out there. But now we're looking for what weeds might be there for that post application. It might be something where we take a look at what diseases might be developing based upon the conditions that we're facing, or if there happens to be an insect problem. So all those things need to be considered when growers go out and do that scouting.
Absolutely. And so I imagine when growers are preparing for their growing season, they're thinking through these things. You probably shouldn't write these lists down in concrete, should you?
No, that's not a good idea. It's always good to have a plan B. We can always see a supply situation pop up where maybe you were planning on using a particular herbicide or an insecticide and all of a sudden it's not available. Or maybe you were going to put corn on some ground and the weather changed, you weren't able to get that done, and now you got to pivot and go over to beans. So it's always good to have a good plan B in place so that if Mother Nature throws you a curve, you can respond accordingly and still get your work done and be successful in 2025.
That's what it's all about, building that success on your operations. Jeff Moon, Market Development Specialist with Corteva Agriscience. Thanks for talking with us this week.
You're welcome. Hope everyone has a great 2025.
Greg Sodier is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Well, Greg Sollier's back with a look at what's to come from the precipitation front. And Greg, who's going to see what this week?
Just about everything but the kitchen sink maybe comes down this week on one of these La Nina pattern shifts around here. And we've taken out and slapped on in here the old purple line, which is on average where we start the week off with the rain versus snow line. And we think with time, this will be settling on southward and divide itself across the middle part of the country. But look at the plume of moisture coming on down this week, an inch or two. This is on top of the recent thaw, by the way, ice jamming effects and previous rains on top of that, plus moisture for this week. So we might be looking at the specter of standing water, lowland ag flooding, and etc. over parts of the Corn Belt, southeastern plains, heavier totals over the southeastern part of the country, some stronger storms here, moisture up and down the eastern seaboard later in the week. This will be all snow in the snow drought areas of the northern and central plains, and upwards of a half a foot or more, Mike, of moisture, water equivalent across the Pacific Northwest all the way down into the northern valleys of California.
Greg, I'm guessing with all of that meteorological weather activity, we're going to see some temps drop for the week of February 10th?
Exactly. Actually, a broad range. And anytime we have this spectrum of at least the motherlode of Arctic air over the southern Canadian prairie, warmth that has played out of late as far north as the southern Great Lakes region. You put the jet stream over that, and this is the storm track you come up with. Busy and active. California across the west along this jet stream pattern on northward, most likely accumulating snow for the upper Midwest, much of the Corn Belt, northern and western areas. Moisture, probably in the form of rain, Ohio Valley, will dry things out over the Gulf Coast, southeastern states, and normal precip over the southwest.
All right. Does that change as we get deeper into the month of February?
We kind of see a little farther slide and southward extension of some of this Arctic air all the way down into Kansas, the Ohio Valley, the warmth, if you will, across the southern states. You mix it with this jet stream pattern west to east. And again, this is probably daytime readings staying below zero near the Canadian border on northward. It is a busy storm track into the Pacific Northwest, accumulating snow northern and central plains. You thought you were going to escape snow in wintertime? Think again across the northern and central plains, much of the Corn Belt locales into the northeast of New England, probably rain towards the Ohio Valley. Gulf Coast has normal precip, and back to drier mode over the southwestern reaches of the country.
All right. How does it look as we get into the month of March?
Some of that cold air easing up back across the Great Lakes region, the warmth over the southern half of the country, and here's a busy storm track, Pacific Northwest across the heart of the Corn Belt into the northeast of New England with late season snows.
Our Farm Progress Roundup is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of high-quality, high-capacity field grain belts and augers. Visit brandt.ca for more. Well, we've made it through the first month of 2025, and if you made a New Year's resolution that you're still sticking to, congratulations. Eric Braun, the Senior Executive for Content at Farm Progress, has recently launched a monthly column to help folks stick to their goals. Eric, thank you so much for talking with us this week.
Absolutely, my pleasure, Mike.
Now, you've got a monthly column, Fit to Be Farm, focused on physical fitness in the season. Eric, talk to me about physical fitness. Why is this something we're focusing on at Farm Progress?
Well, we talk a lot about mental health at Farm Progress, and, a big part of that can be your physical health as well, right? So we're looking into physical health now and getting exercise. Of course, the first part of the year, people begin to set resolutions and they want to get fit, and now you've made it past the Quitter's Day, which is like the second Friday in January, so it's a good time to stay motivated.
Fantastic, staying motivated. When we think about modern agriculture, Eric, we think of it as a pretty active career. Is fitness something farmers need to be working on outside of the fields?
Yeah, in my column, I mentioned, that the mechanization of agriculture, has us, sitting more and getting closer to the desk job. I think about when I was a kid, getting on a hay crew, you spend all summer, throwing little square bales, that just doesn't exist anymore, right? For most part, it's big round bales. It's all, handled by, mechanical means. So that's just one example, but there's plenty of other ways where you can find ways to stay fit.
Absolutely. Now, Eric, starting to get fit is always a challenge. Can you tell us a little bit about your story? Looking at the camera here, you appear to be a fit guy. Is this something you've found important through your whole life?
Yeah, I played, church league softball back in the day and did, some things. But then in my mid 40s, my wife started swimming. She convinced me to play along, and I did. And we both ended up doing triathlons together. And that's how we got fit. It's been a lot of fun and a good way to spend our weekends. Absolutely. And you've been able to maintain this fitness for, what would you say, 10 plus years so far? Yeah, it's a little over 10 years since I joined the swim team and got fit, and started riding bikes and running and doing all kinds of other crazy things. And yeah, it's part of the fun.
It is indeed, and it opens up so much more when you've got that physical ability to do the tasks you want to accomplish. Eric, your column will be coming out monthly. Can you tell us where viewers can find it to keep motivated?
Yeah, you can find it online at farmprogress.com. You'll also find it in the print editions of our various Farm Progress magazines.
Be sure to check it out, folks. Eric Braun, Senior Executive for Content at Farm Progress. Thanks for joining us this week.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mike.
And we'll be right back after this.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. The clock is ticking. It's time to tidy up some of those restoration projects that have been going on with planting season approaching and the need to get those planter parts and get ready to roll. Here's a real nice restoration just finished the other day on a farm in Rochester, Indiana. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Lundell Plastics. Start your planting season off right, producers, with the protection of poly-based products from Lundell Plastics. LundellPlastics.com. Our friend Vance Lundell will be at the Louisville Farm Show. We look forward to seeing him there and visiting with him at that show coming up in just a few days. Well, in Rochester, Indiana, the Fred boys have been working to fix up a tractor that came from Georgia. Let's look at this tractor made in 1972 by international harvester Dave Fred, and his sons James and Eli did a real beautiful restoration on this. Application of the decals, everything looks just perfect on that tractor. You know, that's one thing about the internet now. It's easier to find machines in other parts of the country and get what you want to get it into your shop to restore it. That's a perfect example of a very nice restoration of a 1972 International Farmall 1466. Mark Stock will show you great examples of equipment selling every week. He goes all over the country. Here's his report from Big Iron Auctions.
Well, hello, Max. We're already into February, and National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville, Kentucky is right around the corner. Look forward to seeing a lot of the folks there. We do have a really nice lineup of machinery selling on February the 5th. Joe Sullivan from Carthage, Illinois, one of the featured sellers. He'll be selling a John Deere 5220 mechanical front compact utility tractor with a loader, and a pair of Massey Ferguson compact utility tractors, a 1250 series and a 1260. Plus a 1958 John Deere 430 tractor fully restored and a Ford 801 tractor. Chuck Graves' retirement sale in Charleston, Illinois features a John Deere 4650 tractor, Kinsey 3600 series planter, Case IH Tiger Mate field cultivator. Ag Land and Cattle Inc. out of Hereford, Texas, and Arthur, Nebraska will sell a John Deere S680 combine, John Deere 9410R four-wheel drive tractor, John Deere 8310 RT track tractor, John Deere 9630 four-wheel drive tractor, and a John Deere 8335R mechanical front tractor. Great Plains drill, Tempty grain trailer, live bottom silage trailers, John Deere 4995 self-propelled windrower, Blue Ridge 40-foot fifth wheel camper. And Max, we're listing equipment now to sell in the month of March and April. If you are retiring, call your Big Iron and Sullivan reps today.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. This week, we're going down to the Show Me State, Missouri. Gavin Rohde, the Missouri State FFA Secretary, joins us this week. And Gavin, I understand you've got quite a history in the beef business.
I sure do, yes. Me and my family, I am a fifth-generation cattle producer on both sides of my family. We have our own seed stock operation where we raise purebred Angus and Hereford show cattle. So me and my older brother can show them at the local, state, and national levels. We sell freezer beef. Any form of the beef industry. I love touching all corners of it. I love meeting producers. I love showing cattle. I love every bit of it.
You know, we can hear that enthusiasm in your voice, Gavin. I love to hear that. But sometimes you're not showing cattle. Sometimes you're serving as the secretary for the state of Missouri's FFA. And what was it that made you want to do that job?
What made me want to do that job is I love being put in a position where I can lead and where I can impact other people. As well as my mom was actually the Missouri State Secretary back in 1989 through 1990. So I had a lot of family encouragement. I've had a lot of family history in FFA. My brother was an FFA, all my family members were, but I love being put in a leadership position where I can impact others and where I can meet a bunch of new people. That's one of my driving factors, is the amount of people that I get to meet.
Well, and that is certainly true in your role there. Now, as you look forward, do you hope to find a career in the ag industry?
Definitely. Of course, with my beef industry background, I'd love to work somewhere in ruminant nutrition or working with animal nutrition. I love showing cattle. I love producing the best quality beef that I possibly can. So working in ruminant nutrition and places where I can understand, where I can help grow and develop my beef is something that I'm very interested in, as well as I love being in leadership positions. As I said earlier, that's one of the reasons why I did FFA state office. So if I can work in some sort of a leadership position in the industry, that's what I'd love to do.
Well, we hope you can get it done. Gavin Rohde, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you very much.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by PTx, a new brand from AGCO that includes precision ag technologies from Precision Planting and PTx Trimble. There's an old saying, if you can measure it, you can track it. And if you can track it, you can change it. Chad Colby joins us this week with new technology to help farmers measure the important things on their farm.
It's certainly not uncommon to have a set of scales on your auger cart. Lots of producers have been using those for years. It's just too handy to make sure, A, you don't overload the truck, and B, it's super nice to calibrate the combine's yield monitors. But the challenge always becomes is what happens when we're in the barnyard and we're loading. Most farms don't have a set of on-farm scales, so you're using judgment to make sure you don't overload the trucks. What if I told you there was a better way? From a company called BTI, or Blue Ink Technology, they have a device called an air scale, and it's that simple little pressure sensor that you see right here. I wanted to show you how it works. Essentially, there's a battery in there that's got a 1-year life, so there's no wiring that's required. It all operates under low energy Bluetooth 5.0. They said the range between the phone and the trailer and or truck is about 100 feet, which is nice. If you're out of the truck loading or you're around it, you can just simply look at your phone. But I wanted to show you installation. After you find the leveling valve in your truck, you simply go back, cut the line, and put this sensor in. Honest, as you can see here, it takes upwards of 30 seconds to install this sensor. Now, as far as calibration goes and how it works, it's not really that difficult. Once you have the sensor installed, there's a QR code on the box, and that ties the sensor to the tractor or to the trailer you're hooking it to. And in the app, you can select what truck you want and what trailer. So if you change trailers and so forth, it works really easily. Now, we took the time to get these sensors put in. Obviously, as you can see, these trucks weren't on the road today. So we're going to come back in a future episode as we load the trucks and take them to the elevator, and we'll show you. But I'm telling you, this is a very slick setup at a low cost, an accuracy rate of about 99%. This is a great, great safety feature and really adds some new efficiency to your farm. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad, for that update. Folks, leave it here. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness when we return. Well, the calendar has flipped to February, which means we are just 1 month away from Commodity Classic 2025 in Denver, Colorado. Joining me today to talk about it is one of the co-chairs of the event, Rob Schaefer from El Paso, Illinois. Rob, thanks for talking with us this week.
Oh, thanks for having me on a wonderful warm morning for coming off of last week when it was below zero. So.
Absolutely. And now we're all getting prepared to head to Denver for the Commodity Classic. Rob, are you excited?
I am. It's actually starting to kick in. You know, we've been planning. This will be my second, almost my third full year after this classic on the classic committee. And it's starting to sink in that actually, that me and Deb Gangwish from Nebraska are in charge or co-chairs, and really looking forward to it. And they started planning this back 8 years prior to this. Okay, so that's how far out we have to look for venues and stuff. So it's starting to kick in where there's a lot of planning. We have a weekly meeting, and staff's working really hard, and looking very forward to it. Yes, sir.
And I understand there's going to be a lot of fun things. This is the first time the show's ever been in Denver, so you've got some fun tours of the community this time around. Is that right?
We do. Of course, there's always cores. You know, everybody knows about cores, but there's also a lot of a lot of folks are going out early to ski, and or maybe tagging off on the back end to ski, or as far as families go. But yeah, we've got a lot of cool tours. Of course, the a lot of things to do in Denver, a lot of culinary stuff. We got to tour back in August and then also in March. So we looked at a lot of different places to go and things outside of just a trade show for families to do and that kind of stuff. That's so true. But that trade show is quite a draw. And of course, the educational opportunities. Rob, what are your favorite things to do when you're at a classic event? So the see for yourselves and the mini what's news. Okay, when companies come out with brand new products. Okay, for those to be able to go see what's coming. A couple of years ago, it was all drones. Okay, now drones have done things. It's also, but we have more than just technology. There's also stuff, especially in this climate, to maybe tweak one thing to help your ROI to stay competitive this year. The other thing is I personally love seeing all the big machinery. Okay, we have, in farmer terms, we have 500,000 plus square feet or 11.5 acres. Okay, on the trade show floor. So that's the biggest thing and my nephew and my kids, they love the tractors and combines. I do too. I'm just like everybody else when it comes to that. Rob, it's going to be exciting in Denver. Huge crowd coming off 2 years of record Commodity Classic attendances. Tell our audience, where should they go to get registered? So commodityclassic.com, you can find all the registration on there. Also, if you haven't got your hotels yet, or also you want to see where the mini what's news are and the actual schedule of the events and people speaking and that kind of stuff, is all on commodityclassic.com. Fantastic, folks. Get on there, get registered, and get yourselves to Denver this year. Rob Schaefer, thanks for talking with us today. I appreciate your time, sir. We'll see you in Denver. We'll see you in Denver, indeed. And thank you for tuning in with us today. We certainly appreciate it. Be sure to join us next time right here for This Week in Agribusiness.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.